that I'm working on that engage specifically with ideas of appropriation and erasure, there are two things I want to highlight. The first is I'm a member of theKeepers Hip Hop Collective, which was formed this past summer by Akua Naru, who is an incredible MC, poet, thinker, and she wanted to kind of develop a collective based on her desire to kind of track and trace and share the contributions of women and girls throughout hip hop's almost 50-year history at this point. And so she was working on this archival project while she was Nasir Jones Fellow at Harvard, and then decided, you know, I want to have a group, a cohort that I can work with who's invested not just in this project, but also in a broader project of putting together programs and conversations that focus on and uplift the voices of Black women and girls, which is something I think a lot of programs and projects are devoted to. And so we're seeing ourselves as part of a bigger conversation. So that's one thing, theKeepers Hip Hop Collective and the Keeper Digital Archive, which will do some of that work. And then the second thing is I am the audio director for a women of color-led video game studio called Glow Up Games. And right now we're working on a mobile game for the HBO scripted series Insecure. And part of the work that I'm doing in that mobile game is figuring out how to represent hip hop within the game space. Because as many of you know, Issa Rae, her character, has a deep relationship with hip hop and rap performance as an expressive form, as a form of therapy and as a journaling kind of tool throughout both of her series that we've seen. So I'm thinking a lot about representation issues having to do with hip hop and performance in the game space and how people will play this and how we should think about that meaningfully in this era of digital blackface and appropriation. So thank you for having me. And I'm just so excited to be here.
Okay, I didn't want to scream in the mic. Dr. Kashema Hutchinson.
Thank you, Queen D. Scott, and thank you everyone who's here. Truly appreciate it. So really quickly, because I'm an academic, I have slides, right? So I'm not going to show all of them, but like really quickly, just present. So like when I'm in my classroom and I'm talking about hip hop, you know, it's not just rap, and it's also about writing and other elements. And so like for this one, you know, I have my students, whether they're 16 or 36, talk about theories, and I do something called unobtrusive sprinkling by Dr. Ola of the University of British Columbia, where you just sprinkle in a little bit of hip hop, or a little bit of feminism, or a little bit of something that's marginalized to have the conversation. So when I do my quote of the day, you know, sometimes it's in Spanish, you know, and then I bring it back to Lady Pink and about graffiti, and then bring it back to the history part, you know, where, you know, biopolitics, the separation of land and people, and then the commodification of it, and then, you know, how it impacts us today. And then I have the next slide where I can use like Nicki Minaj lyrics to give you a history lesson on Pharaoh Hatshepsut, as well as Dr. Nadia Lopez of Mott Hall Bridges Academy, and then have these conversations about mattering and women's focusing on the fifth element of knowledge of self. And it really allows the students to see things and hear things differently when I'm discussing hip hop. So that's part of what I do. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Michele.
Hey, thanks for having me, Queen. I'm so honored to be on this panel with such amazing women, always. I am not going to talk a lot because I've been doing a lot of these panel discussions, and I feel like I'm more of a visual person. So I'm going to share a little bit too, or a recap of Ladies of the Hip Hop Festival, which I founded in 2004 in Philadelphia. I'm a Philadelphian. I speak on it all the time. Even though I'm living in the New York City area, I will always and forever be a 215 John. But yeah, I mean, I'm doing similar work as everyone on this panel, just trying to make space and safe space for women in hip hop, specifically dance. But, you know, as part of the festival, we have all female artists that are DJs, that are MCs, that are visual artists. So, the work is not, it doesn't happen, just as dancers, but I know we have a lot of work around just making sure that that part doesn't get forgotten. It was such a huge part. The party was a big part of the birth of this culture. And so, I think we get overlooked because the music takes up so much space, the commercialization, yeah, so that part. And I'm just going to share a little recap of what I do, and then we're going to do this thing. Now watch this. Let's see if this works, technology. Uh-oh. See, I spoke too fast. Okay, here we go.
Oh, share your sound, Michele.
Okay.
No, I think you're gonna have to stop, and then like when you hit share, like
Unplug your headphones.
Oh, there's no volume.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. See, I told y'all.
When you hit share screen at the very bottom in the left-hand corner, there's the option to share the sound with whatever the video is. Just make sure that that's checked off.
See, Queen and I met working at Apple, so I already know she know what it is. Let's start. I'm gonna start over. Gotta get the full feel. And that's me in a nutshell.
Yes, yes. And Rokafella.
Let me unmute myself because just like you, Michele, the computer, the whole virtual pivot. But I'm learning, always a student. Yeah, B-girling is where I stand, but there's a lot of things that branch out from where I stand. And I do have a dance company that has been holding space for women who want to learn the beatbox, learn the history of hip hop, the original, the classic styles of hip hop, to perform in a theater, to write, to teach, and to feel like they belong and they have access to information so that they can, develop, even if they choose not to have a career in dance or hip hop. At least some of this, the ethos of hip hop and being a woman in hip hop translates over into their lives. So that's what I've been doing for a while now, since 1996 when we incorporated, me and my husband, Quick Step. I did start out dancing in the street. I was a hitter. I did go to the clubs. I loved house music, and as I got older, things definitely became apparent to me about, the politics and the game and the commercialization and the misogyny. But I always held this love for the pure magic that hip hop has, and what it creates inside of us who choose to be in it. So I'm still here, and yeah, I became a professor and I teach dance, but it's also exposing students to the culture and the economics and the other factors that brought hip hop about, and how, hip hop can appear one way on TV, but then on the underground, it's like 180. So the journey's been really interesting, and I'm still here for it. And I'm just amazed and humbled by this gathering of sisterhood here today. And I'm here to learn and exchange and grow along with you all.
Thank you, Rokafella. She didn't mention it, but she has a documentary out called All the Ladies Say that she directed, and it's dope. And it tells the, and I'm trying to quote the description, the untold story of B-Girls. You know,
It's
yeah, you gotta
you're right. My mind is just someplace else. The film um, highlights the lives of 6 iconic B-girls and street dancers nationally who were around before me. Some were around before me at the same time, and some were around right after, and they were inspiring me. The film began to be shot in 2005, was finished in 2011. And so it's a time capsule of that like 5-6 year period. And it's historical, and it also sparks conversation about things like femininity and battling and motherhood. So it's a labor of love, and we're hoping to work on either webisodes or part 2 soon. Thanks, I forgot.
That's okay. That's why we here, to hype each other up. So just so I can give all of our attendees an idea of how this is going to go, this is not going to be a round robin. This is the only round robin part of this event. This is going to be a conversation that you all are witnessing. It is being recorded, just to remind everyone. And it will be rebroadcast at some point. We'll send information out about that. So this is just going to be us talking. That's my Jersey in me. Talking about all of the things. If you have a question, please use the Q&A is open. I know that some of you submitted questions beforehand as a part of the registration, and we do have those things in mind, and hopefully we'll be able to hit those questions. But if there's something that comes up in your spirit while we're talking, please put them in the Q&A so we can all see them and we might be able to address them. If not, we'll save them for the Q&A section. And I know that the chat is open for the panelists, so please show us some love. If there's something that someone says that you like, the digital snaps and claps are greatly appreciated. I see some in there right now, but just so we can know that you're resonating with what we're saying, that would be great as well. And without further ado, we just gonna jump right into it. So I just wanted to start with hip hop in the academic space, as we're all in this academic space, navigating what it is to teach hip hop, knowing that our audiences, whether it's a classroom or a workshop or, you know, a 1-week event or whatever the case may be, that oftentimes our students don't look like us. And so what is it or you're walking into a curriculum that's already set, and maybe it's not, it doesn't have the things that would necessitate bringing light to women in hip hop, and particularly women of color in hip hop. And so just to hear from all of you, bless you, Kashema, just to hear from all of you, how you navigate that space. What are some of the things that you feel navigating that space, and what are some of the things that you do to promote more visibility of women in the space? And then y'all can take it from, anybody can start with that question, and I'm sure we can branch off from there.
Yeah, I'll take it. Like, it's the same like the slides that I showed you, where like a lot of my students, because of the location that my school is located, they are Latinas, they're Asians, predominantly non-Black. And so like the slide that I show you where, you know, it's written in Spanish is for them, right? So they connect. And, you know, they understand that like it's not exclusive for them. And so like when I say it's hip hop, like, okay, this is something that relates to me. And even so, having women in hip hop, they see a woman and they identify the empowerment of the statement. And so that gives them agency, right? Or it doesn't give them agency, it kind of activates their agency, right? Because we all have agency within us. So it kind of activates like, yeah, I'm not property. Yeah, I'm not for conquest. You know, I am my own, maybe not fully, but, you know, I'm on my way there. And so showing them things like that, where they can identify with things that they didn't really think that that was for them or a part of them, allows them to really connect in ways that they didn't. So making the unfamiliar familiar, long story short. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges for me has been, and that I'm learning how to sort of navigate around, is the kind of siloing that can take place within an academic context. And so just to give a little bit of context for myself, I started as a postdoc at Brown in 2019. And, prior to that, I had been making my life as a kind of full-time artist life. That was kind of how I was sustaining myself. And so it was kind of wild to have to create a pedagogy around my practice. I was trying to figure it out. And Queen, I would love to hear your experience of how you have thought about creating a pedagogy around a thing that feels very magical and comes to you in ways that don't necessarily align with like the dates on a syllabus, right? But what I was surprised by was the makeup of the students in my class on the first day. I thought, I've got this rap songwriting class, probably a lot of students of color will be in here and it's going to be great. And then I showed up and I was like, where are the students of color? I was really like shook a little bit by sort of that it felt like, how did this happen? And it made me realize, okay, well, there's a lot of different things that bring the bodies to that particular class. One of them can be cross-listing or lack thereof. So what might it mean to have a hip hop songwriting class that's cross-listed with Africana studies, or that's cross-listed with, in particular at Brown, the Center for the Study of Race and Ethnicity in America, right? And so just being on this little music island was meaning that I wasn't having the kind of reach that I assumed that I would have just in naming the course a course about rap songwriting. So that's one strategy that I want to lean into the next time that I teach the course. And the other thing is adding in some requirements about what it means to be in that course. So, it's a creative class. So the entirety of the class can't necessarily be spent on the history of the art form. We've got to make stuff, but there are classes that do that work. And so if you want to be in this class, you've got to have moved through one of those classes or another class that engages with Black music making and the industry more broadly. Like there are other ways that we can have the conversations that need to be had before you step into the creative space outside of my specific class. So I think those are some ways that I've started thinking about how to navigate the academic environment and teaching. But again, Queen, I would love to hear how you even think about a syllabus in this context. What does a syllabus look like? Or for any of the other ladies on the stage, I'd love to hear about that part of the process.
Yeah, I'm gonna, well, yeah, I was gonna say, let me toss it to y'all and then I'll follow up on the back end, only because you asked me, Samus. So.
I think, I started teaching at UW-Madison, and I will say the one thing that it was very different about my opportunity is that they extended a clear opportunity for me to lecture as well as teach dance. So, which is rare, right? They just want you to come in and do the thing, teach them the 5, 6, 7, 8. And that's also, based on what they think they know about hip hop, right? So they don't necessarily want to learn any of these other like cultural forms that, or learn about any of these other cultural forms that, have been on the continuum of Black and Latin dance, right? So I went, going in, my approach was like, first of all, I can't relive a history that I didn't actually live, right? And so I'm not gonna, come in and talk about the glory days of hip hop and the timeline and here's the party. And, we can talk about that stuff. And we did touch, one class on that. And I basically told them where they can find all that information, and, touch points of like what is important to know. But a lot of that is also based around men, right? And the documentation of their experience in the dance. So I don't want to, I wanted to be very conscious that I'm not then in that same space repeating that behavior of only telling their story. And so what I really focused on was the experience of Black women in dance from starting in, and in dance and the arts starting from the 1800s. So starting from the vaudeville circuit and, and our experiences as basically tour managers and building shows and directors and stuff starting back then. And then how on that continuum into what we are now talking about as hip hop, how that relates to what has happened to women over the history of all of these cultural forms, which is being erased, being miscoded. They want to come to us as the, example and model for modern dance, but then to completely erase us from the story, and even, Rock knows this. We've been to a zillion of these hip hop panels where the dance panels in particular, where the guys talk about their first entry into this dance was their mother or their sister, but who are these women? There's women that came before me. There's women that came before us. And it's so hard to connect with them, and it's so hard to find them. And so I wanted to make sure that I really, just amplified that for my students, and make sure, because also this is the first time a lot of them are even examining this culture beyond pop culture, right? And then having it from a woman professor who's also Black, which is also unique in that space. And then you're talking about Wisconsin. That's all I'm going to say. So it is really a challenge. It was a challenge putting lived experience in a syllabus, but it was a challenge that I feel is important, because I feel like we are the experts at what we do. And I don't have an MFA, I don't have a BFA. I have degrees, but I didn't go to school for dance. But I danced all my entire life growing up, and I've been in these circles, and I've been in these clubs, and I've spent my life in this culture. And so I am a master, I mean, and so that's what I really tried to stay conscious of in this space, and then, really take the space for women in this culture. Rokafella's been doing this forever, right? She's set the tone, the example. I would watch her on panels and be like, this is what I got to do, because we need a voice. She's been an unapologetic voice for many, many years. And I know all of y'all know her and have seen her speak. And so I'm going to toss it to her, because this one is the real deal.
Girl, please don't make me cry. Okay, I got the mascara on. Been holding up today, holding up. Thank you, Michele. But you as well have been somebody that I look to when I'm feeling low. I'm like, if she's still going, I'm still going. Because trust me, there's times I don't want to keep going. Oh my God. But, I think that when I first started this, I just wanted to teach the moves. I just wanted everyone to remember that there's breaking, popping, and locking. Please don't forget. So that's all I wanted to do at first. I was really hell-bent on making sure that these cultural forms were preserved, and that there's evolution in it. But let's just, remember the 70s, the fires, crack, AIDS, let's just be first. Let's just go back there. But then I think as I started to be hired to go out to dance studios, this academy, guest speak in universities, like Howard for when Dr. Johnson was alive, and just all these other little, spots that I was invited to. The student population sometimes first wouldn't know anything. Like if I said, where did hip hop, what are the 4 elements? They didn't know anything. And then more and more, I was being invited to classrooms that were just white students. And so, totally different from holding space in the hood where it's just Black and Latinos, to now going and facing people who may pick this up and get real good. And then what? Right. And then what did I do? Like, did I miss something? So then I had to try and shift my messaging in those classrooms to be one of, do not forget where this comes from. Do not forget the oppression that created this dance. And it is your responsibility as a descendant now to mention these names and to do your homework and to show love. So the messaging is different now when I appear. And I try to ask too, like, who are the students and what's the demographic? Because I need to come in already prepared with what I'm going to share, because I am also responsible for what those people regurgitate. And so the message is different in the hood, and then it's different in the university. And when I had to create this syllabus, I wanted to make it so that it's specifically, identifying the 70s and 80s and a little bit of New Jack Swing, the battling, the commercialization, and what has brought us here, what has brought us to hip hop, and where are we, and how does choreo connect with freestyling, And so those are the things that I put in the syllabus. I had to explain it in a way where people, and can know what they're getting into. And even like that, I still on my first day tell them, if you're looking to hear Chris Brown, you can, get your refund or change courses. It's not going to happen here. I'm bringing you back because I need you to know what happened first. So that's how I came about to do what I do. And I always show footage of who are the prominent women of color. So I will show a clip of Angel. If y'all don't know who Angel is, Angyil from Kansas City. She is holding the torch for poppers and women and African-American women right now. Of course, Corona probably stopped her from traveling and eating all the prizes and getting all the trophies, but Angel. Pandora Marie, who is Indigenous and Mexican-American from the West Coast and the Midwest. Pandora Marie, another popper, amazing. And so I try to, tell them, these are the people that are your age right now, women of color, doing it, Miss Funk from the West Coast with her company, Diversa Styles. So I'm just constantly trying to expose new people, new eyes to the people of color and the women who are prominent and working and going hard, so that they don't think it's just men, although props to the men, love y'all. But it's rare to see people like Michele or Marjorie, rest in peace, Kim Holmes, Violet, and others who are still in it, despite being like the only person for that block or that state. So yeah, I'll cut it there.
No, that's great. I mean, I'm not going to repeat anything. I think Rokafella summed up what I was going to say. When I was a young teacher, I started out the same way, like, let's just do the hip hop. Let's just do it. And now that view has changed, my awareness and the responsibility has changed. But that brings me to another, Rokafella, as you were talking about the differences between the academy and then the hood, is how do we recruit? Is that a recruitment issue? How do you all recruit, or what do you think about, Enongo, as you're thinking about how do I, cross list my class? What are your thoughts on recruitment? And does that just fall on your shoulders to stand out on your campus block and just hand out flyers, join my class, or, is that, something that you're working with your various institutions? Are you partnering with them? Are they looking at their recruitment methods, or, what are your thoughts on that? And retention, when you get those students, are these places, do they lend themselves to retaining their students? Or what other, outside issues are causing us to not recruit or not retain those students of color?
Well, I think thank you for asking this question. And again, I'll probably bounce it over to y'all since I'm coming into the space as a bit of a newbie. So one of the challenges within kind of a music departmental space right now, and I'm sure you can speak to this, Queen, is there's a whole conversation about what skill set makes you a musician in an academic context. And there are different traditions that different kind of musicians and artists draw upon. So a big question is sort of like, what is the infrastructure for artists who didn't grow up kind of with a classical repertoire, or who didn't take, lessons from time they were 5 until XYZ, who don't have the money to afford some of those things, but come in with a passion and a skill set and have been able to do things DIY and really create something incredible for themselves. What is in place to support those kinds of students, right? And I think we're asking those questions right now. What does that look like? I think the pandemic has helped us to think through what it means to send students microphones and audio materials so they can be at home composing and constructing MIDI keyboards and all of those kinds of things. But beyond even sort of the material, it's like, what other courses are there that can enable these students to really grow in their artistry? If it's just your one class, that's difficult in terms of retention, especially as students are thinking about, what do I want to do? What's going to make me money? How am I going to pay these student loans back? Should I take this fun elective that I'm not sure how it fits into the rest of my, academic career? Or is there a space that can kind of hold this in view of the broader goals that I have? And I think that's a real challenge for us as individual instructors. I think institutions need to provide us with colleagues, friends, other people that we can kind of build these curricula, with, alongside. So it's not just the one class with the one instructor. That's really, really, I think, a challenge for retention.
I just want to, because you said something that made me think of something else in terms of assigning value as to what it means to be of the caliber to be able to get into the academy. And that really made me think about dance, because of the requirement for ballet or modern. And I'm not a dancer. I'm just going off what I saw on Fame. No, I'm just joking. No, I'm just joking. But this requirement of what it means to study dance in spaces, and not even just dance, but spaces that have more of a rigorous conservatory-like program, and how does that factor into recruitment, retention, or even recruitment and retention as it relates to your classes that somebody wrote in the chat that I just lost it, the elective category. Yeah, that was Rokafella, isn't helpful. Like, does that, are you finding that students elect to take your classes, and, what are the issues that come up in terms of that value assigned of what is a professional dancer, professional musician, artist?
Well, I know that I get students in there that aren't even dancers. They're graduating and they're like, oh, I don't want to take this hip hop class, and I get so offended. I have to hide my face and be like, oh, you think this is gonna be fun? Oh, okay, I got you. But I feel like you're gonna drop out in 2 weeks. You're going to another elective because this isn't for fun. This is my life, and this is a lot of people's lives. Unfortunately, there's no major, right? So the new school, hats off to them, my heart, they included 2 of my hip hop courses. They have a DJ course with another super DJ from, Eclipse, and they've got Rabbi Darkside teaching the rap course, so hats off to them, but there's no major. Where are we going? Where are my students? Where are they going? So there's nothing that they're sending these, students onto the next phase too. So it's an elective, and the least that I can do is just open up an understanding of hip hop and Afro-diasporic expression and women to those students. But I've got people who are, doing some other design, graphics, some other thing, and they're just taking this class. So it's a challenge for me to get them to do it right and then grade them because they're not dancers. So this is right now, the semester is almost ending, and I'm looking at them like, wow, you're not dancers. So I can't say that you learned it and you're awesome and let's go. I have to get assignments and just be like, all right, you hung in there. Props to you. But there's no degree, and I'm still a 1 credit course for everything that I'm bringing to them. So it's hurtful, but I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there.
I'm gonna, back Rock up a little bit. My course was 3 credits because it did have the lecture element. So I was lucky in that way. And so what I will say is that schools that have a little bit more vision and are already thinking of how am I not only going to retain students, but how are they going to continue to grow their population? Because, we got people like Elon Musk out here being billionaires without even going to college. And that, my son is 20. He's going to college. He's going to a local university here in Jersey City. He is in his sophomore year, but we talked a lot his senior year about are we even going that path, right? And so that he ended up finding something just because he likes to argue. So he's a philosophy major, and he likes to talk. Though, you know, Rock knows, she's known him since he was little. You know, he's not a quiet kid, quiet adult, but still like gets into it, you know? So I think these visionary programs are starting to think about that. I mean, my course came in under an interdisciplinary fellowship program. So, and I don't think they expected the response that they had from the students. And that is a huge thing, right? Because we got to have these students advocate for us, right? About why it's important to have people like us that are representative of the community, not just because of credentials, but, you know, not because of higher education credentials. You know what I mean? And I think also these programs are starting to realize like people with degrees in different backgrounds and disciplines also bring whatever that work is to, you know, I mean, I have an arts admin degree, right? And so I have a master's in arts admin. So I've been, you know, the organization and business side, you know what, when that helped me, when the pandemic started, you know, and everybody's like, oh my God, how do we do this? You know, and my organizing arts brain, you know, kicked in, and it was very, very helpful and useful for us during the fellowship. And so, you know, I feel like Rock needs a 3-credit course. Why is her course not a 3-credit course? New York needs to get on it. I'm so sick of this conversation in New York City, the birthplace of this dance, and they don't value it. And that's a huge problem. It's just in the US period, we have to start to value this culture as the influential art form that it is. You know what I mean? You can go anywhere around the globe and they know, you know, and Rock knows because she's traveled the world, you know, as a dancer, and the money that they get to support their programs and them as artists is just, it's insane. And then meanwhile, we're over here like trying to, you know, can I get a class? You know, can I teach a class for $20? It's crazy, you know, but, you know, I will just say that, you know, if you have the opportunity to go in to a school that will allow you to, I think Enongo said, you know, basically going in under different departments, so that, you know, you have maybe 50% from Afro-Am and you have maybe 50% from dance, and, you know, that is your appointment. Like that, they have to start to think about that. And then also institutions have to accept, you know, the pioneers and people and innovators of this culture along with the art form. You don't get to take the art and not take us. It doesn't work like that, you know, and the more vocal that we are, whether we're on the inside or the outside, you know, that is how it's going to change. But, you know, I think, you know, I'm glad that Rock is in this space. I'm glad that all of y'all are in these spaces, because I have lots of conversations of like, we don't need to be in there. We don't need their validation, and we don't, but we should be in there. You know what I mean? Because somebody is in there teaching that doesn't have any business, you know? And I don't want to point out specific stuff, but if you look at these colleges and look at who's leading, it's usually men, and it's usually white men teaching Black music, teaching hip hop culture. It's crazy. You know what I mean? And forget about the representation of women in it. It's just not even there. I mean, that's reflective of the universities as a whole, you know? So yeah, I mean, don't get me started on this, because I get really long-winded about this. And I'm new to higher education as a professor as well. But, you know, these are things that, you know, for a long time, I wanted to be part of creating curriculum. And at UW-Madison, they are in, they're bringing me on as a recruitment tool. You know what I mean? Like you have to don't just be there and teach the course. Like, how else can you be part of creating change in these spaces? You know, because if you also don't want somebody else in there representing us, making the change for us, you know what I mean? Because they don't know, you know,
but
so
also compensating us for that extra labor of being a part of these. I just want to make sure I throw that in there. Like, don't volunteer us without the
Right.
I'm just saying. But Kashema, I want you to, as somebody who just defended the hip hopinist dissertation ever, I would like you to speak to this question of the value on hip hop that Michele and Rock both started alluding to, and your experience with that in this higher ed space. And then I also wanted you to answer the question of what do you, and I would like everybody to answer this question, what do you recommend to, to these institutions, to teachers who are teaching these classes right now, and how can they bring more diversity and equity into their classes, into their curriculum, that as well? I'll ask you that question again if you forget, but first I want you, Kashema, to talk about the valuing this art form in hip hop in the academic space and what your experience has been.
How much time we got left? All right. So, I mean, even in my defense, like I got pushback, right? And so when we talk about value, and we talking about melanated value, right? Melanated value, there's a hierarchy, right? So let's just bring it back to the structure itself, the institution itself. The institution was created and designed to uphold the caste system, the race caste system. So anything that comes with the caste system, right, the culture that comes with it, whether it's hip hop or not, has a certain place. You understand what I'm saying? And so for us, when we do work, it's folk ethnography, folk wisdom, all these other words as opposed to what they value. And so when we look at that, we see that hip hop is one credit. Hip hop is an elective, right? There's no center yet, or it's a center, so it's like there, but not really there, right? It's not included, right? That margin is still there, and it's intentionally still there. And so for us, it's just like, for me, like I said, the unobtrusive sprinkling, it's like you got to get it little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit. But the thing is that there's a conscious resistance from this institution itself that doesn't allow you to fully express in certain spaces, right? And like I was talking to someone and I was just like, all these radical ideas, I'm starting to realize that it's only as radical as they allow you to be, right? And so when we look at this, like certain people doing certain things, it's because they allow you to, oh, look, we have a hip hop program. Oh, look, we have this. And so then it becomes tokenism, right? So as Michele said, get your coins. If you're going to do something, right, pay you, because that is labor, right? And so you were talking about dancing, who's in the studio, who's not, and that's like the experiential knowledge, right? And that how do you quantify that, right? If I didn't go to Juilliard, but I still know how to do 3 spins, am I still not valued? And so how do you bring that into that space? And so the resistance that I got was, well, you didn't write it that way, but it's still written in there. So what's the problem? Just because it doesn't look that way doesn't mean it's not there. You know what I'm saying? And people want to uphold this structure and this perpetual race caste system that we have when it comes to hip hop or anything else, anything of the diaspora. And so for us, it's really just to hang in there and keep going, part of that legacy of resistance and refusal, and continue to go, whether you're going to Jay, whether you're going to Samus, whoever you got in there, and then bring it to the students, because after a while you start changing the minds of the students. And we start changing the minds, like, we want this, and like, they're the ones who's shelling out the money. So if that's what they want, after a while they start to add it. And so soon Rokefella's class has to be 3 credits. It has to be, you know what I mean? First of all, it's Rokafella. Let's get that right. Second of all, what you heard what she said she bringing into her class? I'm like, damn, I need to register next semester, because it's, it's of value, it's of quality. And so that needs to be added, lecture or not, what's there. And so shout out to New School, but the New School's playing themselves. I'll take credit for saying that.
Period.
Okay. And so that's the thing. I'm sorry, what was the second question? I'm trying to.
Second question would be, and it's related to the curriculum the slides that you presented earlier, is like, what would you, because we're talking about combating erasure and appropriation. I want to make sure we get to that other side of it, is how do we give people the the tools, the folks that are watching right now, in terms of that are educators, whether, you know, no matter what type of institution it is, how can they begin to ensure that they are reviewing their curriculum? Like what advice do you have for them? So I'm part of this, I'm teaching, I'm a man, or I'm whatever race or such. What can I do? Am I teaching this course now? What can I do to?
You look for your most marginalized student and make sure that they're no longer marginalized in your class. You learn about that student, their identities, and how do you bring that forward? How do you center that? And that's why I said, I bring Spanish, when I do my critical karaoke, I said, pick a song, no matter what language it is, bring it into the classroom, let's talk about it. See yourself, do your students see themselves in your class? Why or not? What are you doing to improve it so they feel like they matter, right? What are you doing so they understand and respect hip hop culture for what it is? Because remember, hip hop started from youth, right? So how do you bring that element back into the class? Dr. Richardson and Todd Craig has this article called Keeping It 360. So it's like the revolution of the album, right? And so what you do, you bring it right back to where it came from. You highlight and center it, like Rokafella said, you ground it into that history. The same thing Michele does, you ground it into that history and then you springboard from it, but you gotta know that history. I don't care where you teach this class. That history piece needs to be there. It's essential, it's required, like all the courses that they're taking, okay? So you do that, you bring that in and like, all right, what's good? What you think about it? Yeah, what's your thoughts? Oh, your grandmother used to do that? Bet. Oh, that's what you do on that street? Because I'm talking about Marcy projects, but you're talking about Vanderveer houses, right? And so they start to understand and make those connections, right? Like I said, making the unfamiliar familiar, right? Because it's not like they don't know, right? Even the white kid that has his hat backwards and he's rapping about whoever, even if he's rapping with Eminem and he's talking about 8 Mile, how does these neighborhoods, right? Like Rockefeller's talking about the crack epidemic, how these neighborhoods look like each other, and still have these same experiences despite the zip code and the time, right? And the decade, but still have these oppressive forces that inform them how to survive. And that's it. Thank you. Didn't shorten my time. So.
Yes. Boom.
I just want to jump in there. She got me heated over here. I'm like,
yes, please.
I just want to add a little bit to that too, and this is specifically addressing professors. The first thing, do not center yourself in your course. It is not about you. And it's not about you selling your book or writing your book or whatever, big up the people who were there, who created it. That's not that hard, reach out to these folks. They still alive. It's a young culture. For my fellowship course, I brought in, because of, I wanted to make sure that I was teaching my lived experience. I brought in the women in Philly who have influenced me, that are in film and who are in music and who are journalists, right? Because we're not one dimensional. It's not just about, the dance. It's a culture. Teach it as a culture. Don't teach it as just this one element, right? And then 2, if you are not of this culture, you need to start reaching out to people who are. You really do. That it's problematic, that you're talking about things and teaching things that you haven't experienced. That, it's not acceptable, and I think the last thing, and I lost my thought. BIPOC professors unite, because like we need to come together like Avengers, because I'm telling you, I don't have the wherewithal anymore. I'm tired. I can't do it alone. I've been doing it too long, even by choice for a long time alone, thinking that's the path, but it's not. Like, I need support. I'm burnt out financially, like we're trying to figure out how to do these programs and stuff, all in our own little silos that you talked about before, Queen, because we're even guilty of that, because not because we want it, but just because we grow up in households of color, knowing that especially the women, we got to hold it down. There's no complaining. You know, the going joke in my family is Michele could cook a whole meal by age 12. And I did. You know, I was taking care of my siblings, my 3 siblings, while my mom was out going back to school, you know, getting her GED, getting her, you know, associate's degree, getting her bachelor's degree. My mom was living her career or building her life while I was growing up. And because I had 3 siblings, it was my responsibility to take care of them. And so that we take that into our adult lives and into our professional lives, you know, and end up being those same people in those lives and just thinking that's the way to go, you know, and I'm guilty of it. I'm guilty. I am pointing the finger, but I'm also including myself in that group that, you know, we need to find space to come together, you know. And I know I preach this and I don't practice it as much as I should. I'm, you know, pulling back the curtain, you know, because it's easy to stay in your own space for all kinds of reasons, protection, you know, imposter syndrome. I'm really like that because I'm not from New York, and it's really sometimes not enough space for you if you're not from New York, you know. That's a reality, you know. So anyway, that's my thing, directly at people who are teaching in higher education.
Oh my goodness, y'all are spitting tonight. I'm just like, ah! I've been trying to write down everything that y'all are saying because it's so powerful. Thank you for being so brilliant and doing the work that you do. The only thing I would really add to that, or maybe just kind of add into what was already said, is the importance of kind of investing in local knowledge, like where you are. And that's a huge part of what it means to be in hip hop culture, right? Like where you are matters. And so instead of kind of teaching this perspective from nowhere, it's like, well, where are you? What does the hip hop look like in the place that you live? Get to be engaged and involved in those communities. What do those folks need? What are the venues like in the place that you're at? I mean, I've had this conversation recently because I've been thinking about, okay, where are the spaces where informal music making happen, right? Like, what do those spaces look like? And are those spaces reflected on college campuses? Often not, you know, even the performance halls or the concert halls, it's like, well, what if we need something that's like a dive bar? What if we need a place with a sticky floor with some, you know, some graphics on the wall, something that just reflects the sound that I'm about to create or the movement that we're about to create in this space. So getting invested in the local dynamics of the community is also about figuring out where those spaces are and not jumping into those spaces, of course, but figuring out how you can support them and how your students can engage with those communities and you know, hopefully be able to be in conversation with each other, because there are artists wherever you go. There are artists. I promise you, there's hip hop wherever, whatever small town you might end up in, there is hip hop there. There are people living and expressing that. So I would just implore you to do that kind of work and figuring out what's going on locally.
And just to add to that, my biggest pet peeve with hip hop scholars back in the day before I became one was, what open mic have you gone to that you actually spit something at? Where are your spray cans? Where's the mural that you made? Did you battle ever? Did you dance? What style do you do? Right? Can you DJ? Oh, can you name me some classic break beats from the 70s? You know, my pet peeve was, you're teaching it, you never did it. That's great, you studied it. Yes, because that's the other half, right, that I need, you know, to get the dissertation going, right? I need that. But you're missing something too. And I always let them know, go to the open mic, go write something, spit it, even if it's whack, just go get that feeling. What's it like to get up on a microphone? What's it like to be booed? What's it like to be, hey, that's you know, what's that feeling like? Because that's what you need to know if you're going to be teaching hip hop to anybody. You know, now I became a scholar, so now I had to do all the writing and the assignments. And so I'm, you know, I'm meeting you halfway. You need to meet us halfway if you're going to teach hip hop. So that's all I want to say.
And Rock shouldn't have to do that work. There's, you know, they've been giving out honorary doctorates to people for a minute, and her work speaks for itself. She shouldn't have to do that paperwork, you know. And if she does, somebody needs to get her all the student assistants and all that stuff, and she just needs to spit it and they need to write it, because, you know, no.
I love this love. I love this love that's happening, this love cipher. We have a couple of questions in the chat. I know we're coming up on the end, so I do want to get to some of the questions. Now, in the registration, there was a lot of questions about lyricism, women's lyricism, and how can, I'm trying to find where I put it. Okay, I'm going to paraphrase then. So the first question, and they're kind of related, was how can we convey as women that when we're spitting these lyrics, or when these female artists are spitting these lyrics, that it's not about men, that it is about ourselves. Almost like when I get dressed, I don't get dressed thinking about what man is going to see me. I get dressed, I mean, it's the pandemic, so I get dressed pretty much in sweatpants, but but you know, when I get dressed because I feel good about what it is that I'm wearing. And so it's the same thing with lyricism, and how can that be conveyed? And then the other piece was about the presence of women in hip hop, and how does that change, how does that impact, particularly for this question, was the Black community. Will having more women in hip hop impact the community? Of, you know, my answer to that is of course, but I'll let y'all answer specifically. I'll start with you, Enongo, as a lyricist, and you can tag me in if you want, about the about women's lyricism.
Yeah, this is the question of the moment. I think a lot of folks are thinking about, as all of these songs about, well, the question of the moment that we keep returning to, because of course, there's the cycles of Black women and women of color sexuality as it's expressed. It just moves around and around and around, and I hope that the conversation will evolve beyond, the outrage around women's just expression of their sexual selves. I think just in terms of how to convey, that's a really difficult question, because, I want to say this in the nicest way possible, but
It's your best shot.
Straight men are the worst. So so it's like you can do anything and it'll still be interpreted. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, is that trying to figure out a way to evade their gaze is, I feel like, is not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to make the work that speaks to us and that is engaging. I do think we should allow ourselves for a wider variety of ways that our sexual fantasies can look, and that often they end up reflecting the gaze. But it's like, what if we could just push past that and think about different kinds of bodies and different kinds of experiences within the space? And I think, it's complicated, because I think a lot of women MCs find themselves trapped within boxes that they're always trying to navigate around, and that finds its way into the lyrics. But yeah, my hope is that we can get creative with the visions that we're exploring through our lyrics, that we're exploring different kinds of fantasies that don't just reflect sort of the same fantasies that you often see coming from, men within that space. So that was kind of a non-answer, but I hope that it reflected a little bit of the challenge.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's great. And I would add to that, what has been repeated in this whole talk is that history is so important, and that the history of censorship, particularly of Black and brown bodies, really needs to, you really need to have an idea of that, especially as somebody of color navigating who wants to express yourself in hip hop. I think it's really important to understand that history, that Black bodies have been censored even before our music had lyrics, really. You're talking about instrumental jazz, was censored because it was going to get the white kids in a frenzy, you know, in a sexual frenzy is what was, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's basically what was being said. And I think understanding that history of censorship of Blackness will give a different perspective of why it is so disruptive when, you know, a Cardi B or a Megan Thee Stallion or a Lil' Kim says something about their sexual appetite. Why is that so disruptive? Why is that so destructive? Whereas, you know, no shade to Kendrick Lamar, love his music. He can say, and I'm going to uncensor myself for a second. He can say, let me put the head in and win a Pulitzer Prize. So for that body of work, and not have to defend it and have other art critics come in and defend and interpret his art as art for the art that it is. What meanwhile, because of Lil' Kim's subject matter, oh, I'm getting on my soapbox, I'm sorry. Because of Lil' Kim's subject matter, we miss all of the alliteration, all of the rhythmic motifs, all of the art and musicality of her delivery, her voice, just all of those elements that we critique in other genres, every other genre, lyrics, no lyrics, with no problem. But when it comes to hip hop in particular, and specifically sexual hip hop from Black women or women of color, then it's dismissed. Then it's, oh, this subject matter is taboo. I can't get past the subject matter to even analyze this piece of work. So that's all I wanted to to add on that. I do have, there's a question in the Q&A that I do want to get to, because it's a great question, and I'd like for whoever feels led to answer this one. This person says, I love hip hop, particularly the production and beats that define the genre. However, I'm obviously aware of how male dominated it is and of the Black history that is tied so closely to its origins. As a white woman, how do I enter the hip hop world both appropriately and to not be defined by my gender or race?
That's a very loaded question, you know, and when I have to deal with my white dancers, my white students, you know, I quickly tell them, you must know that you're entering a tribal village, and you must know that there are certain things that, you know, you are participating in, but it's not of you. And so that's the first thing I have to make clear to any of my, and there are a lot of white B girls there, they just are, you know, and they love and they represent our culture, and they make sure that they know the history and they can give credit, and they know that yesterday was an anniversary of, you know, the founder, the inventor of locking, you know, that he passed away. They make it their point to know the pioneers, the blueprint, where it's at, because it's their responsibility, because they cannot just be here like a trophy. That's not gonna fly. And with someone like me, who's trying to make sure that the Bronx gets the information, the history, and that we're still at the head of hip hop, when I have people who are either Asian or white, or, you know, I gotta let them know, I'm glad you're here and I'm glad you're so invested, but let's talk. Let's talk. You know, yes, rap music can be misogynistic. You can find the other rap songs that aren't. Find them, go find them. I can help you, but I need you to do something for your own investment in this. If you're a B girl, a breaker, a locker, who were the first ones? You know, what's capoeira? What's tap? Who's the Mita Joe? Right? I need you to do this research at the same time that you're dancing, because you're going to take something off this table. You're going to get your belly full. You're going to go and maybe open your own restaurant and cook what you got from here. What are you putting back on the table? Because people like me and the rest of us are hungry, but we're still making this banquet and everybody comes and eats. And I'm happy you're here. It's fun. But when the table is empty, what's up? What's up? That's you. That's you. So from jump, I have to make sure that you're just able to partake, understand where you're at when you come in, right? And then how are you helping? How are you helping us? Because we're still struggling. And if you can be a partner, that's awesome. I need more of that, and so I know it's difficult. And even someone who's like me, Puerto Rican, when the Black Lives Matter thing happened last year, ooh, Black people were telling me, no, 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 you're Latina, you're a guest, get out. And I was like, okay, you can say that. And I respect that. And I know where that's coming from. I respect that. But I'm here. I was here. I grew up in it. I smelled the fires. I know what we're going through. And so I'm in solidarity with you. And it's great. You want to say I'm a guest? I respect that. And I will respect your boundary, because I know what that's like as well. But it's difficult. It's so difficult. But for all of us, because even with Black people, like who's fair skinned, who's tall, who's got the bigger butt, smaller waist, right? We're still do it to ourselves.
That's the colonization, Rock.
Ooh.
Like, don't even like that. First of all, this is too deep to even go in, but I mean, come on, whoever it was, send them my way, because we're gonna have a talk, because you don't know your history. Okay.
But it's there. But it's there.
But it's not true though. But anyway, listen, I'm coming in. The guest thing, I just got to add, you said all the things. You didn't open your restaurant. And now, not only did you open your restaurant, but now you telling me you're not a guest. And I had this conversation the other day, and I shared this with the ladies. I had, someone who I respect dearly and who has spent years in this culture. And she has someone who also has been in this culture for many years and who is Black, male, to her, you're not a guest. You're of the culture. Forget that. You're not a guest. And she's like, so I'm not a guest. I'm a cultural, what did she say? A cultural tradition bearer. And I was like, okay, well, here's the thing. You can say that, but you need to be prepared for the pushback that's going to come with that, because those are words that we use to describe what we do, because we're not from the institution, right? So we don't have pedagogy and all this stuff to describe what we do, right? It's tradition. It's the stories. It's our history that we pass on. So in calling yourself that and not being a person who even lived that way as a part of your life, that you're going to get pushback. So be prepared for that, and think about how you're going to respond to that. And then number two, like, I don't invite people to my house. So if you're a guest, you should be considered yourself privileged, and you should be honored, as opposed to taking it as an insult. So that you should be a guest, and you should be privileged to be a guest, and say, as a guest, I need to uphold these traditions. I need to acknowledge and share the people who came before me and the people who I'm learning from, and the people. It's not about me. Why are you centering yourself? Why has this become about you? You know what I mean? And so this question of like being a guest in the culture, like, it's always thought of as something negative. You should be honored that somebody's even extending that to you, and I'm not even going to address the thing about you being a guest. That's just preposterous and ridiculous. But I will talk a little bit too about lyricism. I'm not a lyricist, but again, I think
Send me a really good article. We had another conversation. Go ahead.
There's so much that's such a loaded conversation to have as well, because I don't have a problem with women expressing their sexuality. I think, for me, speaking just for myself, and even watching people like Rokafella, I always tell this story. I remember the first time I saw her, and I was like, oh my God, who is this gorgeous woman spinning on her head and doing windmills? She came in, was like, and then had all the body. She had the hair. Her hair was like, I was like, oh my God. So to me, the power was the balance between both of those things, right? So to see her, for the first time, and I can't even remember where it was. I think she was in Philly somewhere, and I saw her breaking, and I was like, what? I was just totally blown away by the power that she brought as a woman, embracing both her femininity, but also like this, masculine side to her. I think she's done a great job. I think Marjorie was one of those other people, Marjorie Smart, to me, who was just like, such a woman and so feminine in so many ways, but also just like she would stomp you out, not literally, but well, maybe literally, but for sure when she danced, you know what I mean? She could come for any dude. And so I think there's power in that. And I think it's the same thing for being a lyricist. I think embracing that sexuality is super powerful, right? So, when we talk about songs like WAP and all these things, what I had my students do was take a poem from Ursula Rucker and take WAP lyrics, who, if you've ever listened to Ursula, like you talking about, I mean, she was a revolutionary in using this kind of language before it was a thing, right? You know, so I feel like it's not about the words. It's not even about, you know, saying the P word. I ain't gonna say it on the Zoom, you know, I don't want to get kicked off, you know, but you know, she said it in ways that I, even when the first time I heard her, I was like, you know, because I wasn't really used to hearing that. But she wrote those words. She wrote those words. The issue, or not the issue, but the question I think that accompanies my thought behind, you know, Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion and Lil Kim is, did they write those lyrics? You know, I think if you look at their credits, some of them they did, you know, but some of those lyrics are and songs, some of their most powerful songs were written by men. So still, them talking about themselves in that way is still from the male gaze. And this is not a judgment on the way you dress or coming down a pole or any of that, because that's really hard work. I don't know if you ever tried it, but I took a pole class, couldn't do it. But you know, so it's no judgment on that, because I feel like that's a, you know, it's not, everything should be your choice as a woman. That's what I feel like. As long as you know where that line is for you about, you know, how you want to dress or present yourself, or you know, what you want to say, as long as you know where that line is for you, then we're fine. But I just want to push back a little bit and make sure that we are actually pinning our words. That's it, you know?
Yeah, I would just, first of all, everything that everybody has said. And I want to jump in just real quick to say, in terms of the conversation around penning of words and lyrics, there's also this production chain that I think is really, you know, that we have to think about in terms of gender, where, you know, the engineer who's running the session, who's the producer, who's the A&R. So there's this whole string of other individuals who, even if that woman is sitting down and saying, this is what I want to say, you know, for a record that's at that level, a lot of hands touched it, a lot of eyes, a lot of ears refined what that sound was. And so it's, you know, it's endlessly complicated in trying to figure out, you know, where's their place in their voice and their perspective when there's so many folks who are invested in, you know, a particular image and sound coming to be. And just to get to talk about the question of like being a guest, I mean, I think the other part, or part of what was being discussed, is just being hyper aware of what that means for the opportunities that are afforded to you. And again, going back to what Rokafella was saying with the responsibility that is then placed on you to make sure that if you have an opportunity, you're creating space for somebody else. So, you know, really being specific about what those things look like, right? Because colorism is real, you know, fat phobia is real. There are all of these different ways that we navigate certain parts of our identity with more ease than other folks. And so we just have to always be thinking about who's the person who's left out from this conversation. And if so, what can I do to amplify, I see gender amplify, to amplify that voice, to promote that voice, to help to recuperate those stories. What is my responsibility here for the folks who don't get to be in the same space? And so just really start to think about what are those, how does that show up in your life? How do you get opportunities that other people are not afforded? And start to do the work of, you know, resisting that.
Yeah, I just wanted to also add that, like, you remember when I was talking about the institution itself and how that looks like, but just keep in mind that the music industry is an institution as well. And so they're following the same path, where there's higher education or, you know, a studio with your mans in them, it's the same thing. And so they follow the same rules. And so that's why we see these, you know, the erasure and inequities in these spaces and how they mirror each other, you know, even if like Cardi saying one thing or something else, it reflects it across the board. And so being conscious of that and knowing that it is just not another institution. That's it. And then I agree with everything else that Josh said about like the guests. Thank you.
Yes, it's 6:28. I do want to, there's two questions in the Q&A. Real quick, just one of you, how has it been navigating the field when you started versus now as a woman?
Rock.
All
Well,
right,
I
Rock,
think
take it.
I think in the beginning it was just like, the wild, wild west. And, I could tell you, you really had to be sharp and you had to be so skilled. Your skills had to be up here if you want to even step into any meeting or circle or show, or your skill, you had to have it. I think things have changed a bit now, right? And I'm not saying that women are not skilled. They're totally skilled now, but I think that there's just a little more wiggle room for women to speak their truths and be respected for speaking it, so that the revenge doesn't come, because revenge really came back in the day. Let me tell you, it came, and you had to like navigate. And so I think that the atmosphere, the landscape is a little more open and embracing women who are skilled and sharp and have something to bring to the table. So I just want to say it is a little bit better. There's so much more still to go. So much.
And then the last question, I know we got 1 minute, but is from the registration, and it says, where did it go? Talking about, okay, so are you seeing men in your audiences? So Enongo, this is gonna be for you. Are you seeing men as your listeners? If not, why, and how can this change? So basically, is women in hip hop, is that cutting off the reach to men?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I've seen, I mean, I definitely feel like that happens, but at my shows, I feel like I actually want more women to be at my shows. Like that would be my preference, is if there were to be more women in those spaces. And I think a lot of that is doing the work of making sure that women, Black women in particular, feel safe in those spaces. So with me being there, I can guarantee, or I can do my best to ensure that if they come to the show, they will not be harassed or have to deal with those kinds of issues. But yeah, I actually feel like it skews in the other way, and that frustrates me, because that's not who I make my music for. But I'm grateful to have the supporters that I have. But I love women, so I love the women in my life, and it's for us. It's all for us.
Well, it is 6:31. We are at the end of our time. And I just want to say again, thank you all so much for being here, ladies, for sharing your knowledge. I just want to point out that to have these types of conversations, it is labor, it is emotional labor. And it is, I'm just thankful that you all have shared your experiences and your time and your effort with us in our community. We are so grateful. I am so grateful and thankful. And I just want to again thank Toki Wright and Dr. Kim from the professional music department, Sean Skeet from the ensemble department, our respective divisions and deans, and also Martha Diaz as well. We will get the information to those of you who registered about any replay that's happening. But thank you all so much for coming. Thank you all so much for attending in the space, and have a great night.
Thanks, Queen. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
It was dope.